Good morning. It was a few years ago, and our Lancaster County got together, and we were trying to figure out how we infuse restorative justice into everything that we do. And we started dreaming of the kind of things we can do with the resources we have to help make that happen. And so today you're going to hear two different nonprofits who are trying to get at how do we get the kids back into the system instead of encouraging them to get out of it. So I remember Clare and I have been working at this for a few years, and I remember a kid who he got into a scuffle at school, and he took his cup, metal cup, and he bopped another kid on the head. And he came in with his grandmother, and he was like, "This is no big deal." Well, the metal cup was bent, so it was kind of a big deal. And so we worked on with this kid on, what happened, what can you do again? And then I always remember when we asked, who did it affect? And this kid was like, well, it didn't affect anybody. And there was his grandmother sitting with, day off of work. Right now he was a music kid, so scholarship at risk. And he had not yet processed what he did and what could happen, because this kid didn't want that stuff to happen again. And so today, the first half, we're going to talk about what we do in the Mediation Center. Second half, we're going to talk about restorative justice, what goes on at the Lighthouse. And to me, I think we're seeing some successes. Some were here a couple hours ago. We just finished our evidence-based level 2 research that we just got out of the University of Omaha. So this is from, I want to give them credit, the Juvenile Justice Institute. And if you need some of this for the stuff, I'm going to show you some of the statistics for what we've been doing at the Mediation Center. I'm going to go through that, and then Claire's going to kind of share some of the stories of what we do and how we do it. So, just FYI, we've been doing a couple programs. If you're not from Lancaster County, we do something called Project Restore. Project Restore, kids get in trouble at school, and it's not too big a thing. A ticket goes to the county attorney. County attorney has an option to send it to the county and then to us to do a restorative justice process. That is an option. And then we also work with Diversion. And then a couple other processes we do, probably is not much in this. We work with truancy. Some of you might. We had a presentation yesterday. And we also, if they get into probation, we also work with probation. Kids are going to get the opportunity to do some of this, but you'll see the cases. We kind of started 2015, 2016. Caseloads have just been going up, which is a good thing, because we want kids to get the opportunity once again. I remember meeting with the LPS executives, this was 6 years ago, and what they were figuring out is when they kicked kids out of school, their graduation rates went down. I'll be darned. And so they wanted to figure out a way of a different process to in some way. And then what we know is that we're going to get to that, the ethnic involvement within the system is so out of whack. How do we keep kids out of the system so they can get back in and have successes? So some of the basic stuff, male, female, is pretty gosh darn close on male, females that come to us. And then this is the big one that we got to figure out, and we're not there yet. Some of you were all on the Racial Ethnic Diversity Committee. We study this every month, every other month. And we're seeing it within our center. This is out of whack, and we got to figure out better ways to get at that. But the people that we see are, we're seeing this, and we got to figure out how to do that better. So the two kind of major programs we do at the Mediation Center, you'll see the grades that we work with. So, mostly 6th grade through high school. We do an awful lot, you'll see, within the 9th, 10th, 11th grade. That's where 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, that's where a lot of our kids are coming from that we're going to work with. And then the gender stuff is down there. And then here's the thing, what we see. We see an awful lot of assaults. We used to, nationally, with mediation, we work with the, we call it victim offender. We kind of moved the name because when we first started doing this, when there's a fight, one will come in and say, they started it. And then I responded, and I'm the one that got caught. And so, instead of doing the one against the other, we realized there was an incident. And then how can we help these youth work on this incident to see if they in some way could respond in a different way or try to get at it very early. And I'll use an example, and Clare may use this. We had a high school actually in Lincoln, and they were feeling the ethnic tension that was growing within their high school and the conflict that was happening. And they wanted to come up with processes to work on that in a way before it got too bad. And so they wanted to use these kind of processes of getting people together to explore what's going on, what was an incident, how can we do it differently. Youth are starting to think about how we can handle conflict differently. And kind of the essence of what we do at the Mediation Center, and you all probably are involved in some mediation facilitation yourself. Our goal is that we know if the youth can come up with ideas, how they can do it differently, and it's their idea, the percentage of them actually doing it is just so much better. And then also, as you know, what we do we work an awful lot with families, parents, custody situations. We teach classes on conflict, and I always use this example. If I'm working with parents, I tell them that we all, I think, have people that we like, trust, that no matter what we say, what we do, they kind of have our back. And a lot of times, by the time people get to the Mediation Center, they've shifted into what I call that positive intimacy. They've shifted into negative intimacy, where when the other person breathes, it feels like they're doing it just to tick you off. And when you shift it into negative intimacy, I'm not even sure with their brain they're even hearing what you're saying, because that brain gets into that protective mode. And so a lot of times we're trying to create an atmosphere where they get out of that, back into that frontal lobe where people can get into problem solving. And so with these kids, we're really working on a welcoming atmosphere, an opportunity for them to kind of share what's going on in a non-judgmental way, and to help them process some problem solving on what they can do, and the supports that they need to help make that happen. So a lot of what you're going to hear today is we're trying to get those youth into, instead of I'm protecting myself, into some way, hey, I'm going to take a lead in this to try to get at that better. So we have, we do at the Mediation Center, we have a variety of processes that we use, and all of our cases are sent to us. So the cases we're going to talk of today, something has happened. It's gone to the county attorney, it's gone to the county, and then they have chosen that we're one way we can deal with this particular incident. So when it comes to probation, it gets court ordered. And as you'll see, most of the time, and this is an awful lot of stuff that Clare works on, we try to meet to see are they willing to do it? And most of the time they come up with some type of an agreement of what they'd be willing to do. And so if we can get a hold of them, we can get them in the door, we can work with their parents, a lot of times they're willing to help make some of that happen. So enough of me, I want Clare to kind of share what we do and how we do it. Clare.
All right. And I need the microphone, don't I?
Yes.
I hate the microphone.
Yeah.
Can I just hold it?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you all hear me? Yeah. And this is being recorded. Is that why I'm having to? Because I have a teacher voice, so I really don't need this. But as Casey said, so the cases come in from Lancaster County, and at that point, like I said, he said we have Project Restore. Those are the cases that come from the schools. Diversion often can happen outside of the school. Some of them happen in school. And then, of course, we have probation cases, and those are a whole gamut of things. I do want to commend Lancaster County for many reasons, but when I started this job 7 years ago, and shortly into it, we were realizing a lot of cases, not just diversion, but a lot of cases had a lot of mental health issues. And we were really, and the county was seeing it, we talked about it. Ryan Dvorak is in the room, we had lots of conversations about it. And we are so lucky that we have now another category, which is called mental health diversion. And wow, they're tough. We're not gonna lie, they are tough. But we are able to give more services, or I should say Lancaster County is giving more services. Our process is usually only 2 meetings, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But with mental health, we are able to offer more meetings and spending a little bit more time with these families, because most of those cases do encompass an entire family. So the case comes in, I get some information, it's not a ton, and I don't want to dig too deep into it, because the restorative justice process is all about hearing the story. And they all have their own truth. So I look at that, my first then is getting a hold of the families. We bring them in for what we call an IPS, an individual personal interview. And this is where, this is really important. This is where we create that safe space. This is where they hear that this is gonna be confidential. I'm not gonna share anything they tell me in that room with anybody. Not the officer that sent it over, not the school. It's that total confidential, so they can tell me whatever and I have to hang on to that information. There's obviously that one exception. If they, we find out that someone's hurt them, they've been, or they're gonna hurt themselves, or someone's threatened to hurt them. So that's where we start. Let's start building that box of safety. And then I explained to them a little bit about what this process is. And that very first process, the very first step of the process is the story, because everybody has their own truth. So, and I let them share that story. And I establish also that we're not going to judge that story. I'm not going to solve it. I'm not going to solve what has happened. So we go through the story, and then we're going to look at, well, who was impacted by that? And as Casey brought the case where, nobody was, we dig a little deeper. Let's keep going. Let's find out. Well, I was. Well, and possibly the other person. And then we start, let's go a little further, because of course we recognize the fact that restorative justice is about acknowledging that when something happens, there's a scattering out effect, that there affects a lot of people. So, and then we look at, well, how were they affected? Because not everybody's affected in the same way. And so we look at that, and then the very final step, and the most important step that I tell these young people, is how are we going to heal? How are we going to repair the harm? What needs to happen? And they kind of look at me like, well, what do I need to do? Not going to tell you. That is their process. They need to identify what are the things that need to happen for them to be able to heal, and for them to be able to move forward. And I also talk about Lancaster County, and I think anybody that's involved with restorative justice knows how important it is for this process to get them to be able to move forward and get this, not have this be an identifying situation for them. So we go through that, and then I always tell them, this is kind of a dress rehearsal. This is, you're gonna do basically the same process again when you come back for the conference. Now we also, Casey said, we kind of changed the name up when we first started, because we were dealing with a lot of assaults. And I call it the poke the bear syndrome. It's that poke the bear, poke the bear, poke the bear reacts, guess who gets caught? The bear. So we had both, the people that are involved are both victims and offenders, because they both were involved in it. The other thing that is important in the process is we hope that we can have the victim involved, because this is a process where the victim actually has a voice in restorative justice. So I always interview what would be considered the offender first, because I kind of want to hear where they are and what space they're in, and then I contact the victim if I have that information. And hopefully I will have the victim get involved. I'm sad to tell you that oftentimes in assault cases in high schools, the victim doesn't want to participate. I can only speculate why, and I'm sure a lot of you can think, and I'll just say it, I don't think they want to own their part of it, okay? So oftentimes we don't have that victim, but when we do have the victim, wow, is it powerful. And it's mind-blowing what you can see young people, if we get out of the way and we give them kind of some guideposts and lay that path for them, it is amazing the dialogue that they will have if you give them the opportunity to have it. So I've interviewed them, then I try to get a hold of the victim. Same process with them. It is the same, we want to hear their story, we want to hear how they were impacted, and then the difference is we ask them specifically, what do you think needs to happen? Also, when I'm doing that interview, I get them to try to dig a little deeper. Well, obviously, I probably need to apologize. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. Think about that. Know what that's going to look like. The county often asks them to do either an apology or a reflection statement, and I try to get them on that path at that point, at that initial interview. Once we've determined the fact that we can move them into a conference, not all of them can. I think Lisa is here. We had a case. I don't have very many. I have to say that. Out of all the cases I've done, there's only been maybe a handful, and I think that's pretty good actually when you think about 700 plus cases. But once in a while, it's very apparent this kid is not going to be able to move into that process. Either they're not there, sometimes it's a capacity issue, and then we kind of do a hybrid where I don't actually put two mediators. I might do that next meeting with them. So I make that determination. I kind of look at where we're headed, if the victim, and then if we're able to put the victim in the room, if it's going to work, because we can't do any harm. I'm not going to have a victim come in there and rant. That's not going to do any healing for anybody. So we make that determination. When they come in, and we actually do, we call it a restorative justice dialogue. I think that's a little softer. A restorative justice, and I let them know, you're going to be talking. This is a dialogue. We always meet with them separately. We do not put them together immediately. Because, you know, when I met with them, they were okay. But a whole lot can happen from the time I met with them to the time they're going to sit down and have this dialogue. So we can determine that it's going to be okay to bring them together. Sometimes most of the time they come together very quickly. So I have two mediators. They meet with them each individually, then they bring them together, and away we go with the conference. Wow. Everybody okay in here? There have been times, again, only a handful, where we have determined we cannot bring these people together, so we do what's called a shuttle. And we take that information back and forth, and once in a while we've started out with the shuttle and then we've brought them back together. Then of course the next step is that we're going to look at an agreement, or we're going to talk about the kinds of things that are going to happen to repair the harm. Hopefully we've got the victim in there, and oftentimes there's an apology. We hope, not always, but those are things that happen. There might be restitution. We had a case many years ago that was absolutely, this happened to be a probation case where there was restitution, and the farmer that was there, that when it was all done, he said, you know, I really don't need any money. I want to get to know you. Would you be willing to work some of this off with me? And the kid agreed. They did some landscaping work together. When they walked out of the conference, they walked out together. They were talking pickups because the guy had noticed. All of a sudden there was a relationship built. Does that happen often? Probably not, but when it does, wow, it's one of those really aha moments. Diversion, Project Restore, diversion, again, you saw the stats, whole lot of assaults. So a lot of times when we don't, I want to back up just a minute. When we don't have the victim, we try to get what's called a youth surrogate at the table. Oftentimes people refer to as community surrogates. I like to use young people in these cases because usually the assault is with a young person or the theft might have been against a young person, whatever it might be. These are young people that have either been through our process and come out the other side in a positive way, or they happen to be peer mediators that have been trained at the high schools, like Casey referred to, one of the high schools here. We've got several now that have some peer-to-peer mediation. We put them at the table, not as mediators, but as a reflection, as a youth. First of all, it's great when they come in and they see somebody that looks like them rather than their grandmother, because they're looking at their grandma when they look at me. And they look at that young person, they go, yeah, they get it. They know what it's like to walk those hallways and listen to the trash talk and all of those kinds of things. So we put that youth surrogate at the table to help with that dialogue, and then also they start to brainstorm a little bit on what we call an action plan, on how are you going to handle this the next time. Kids always know exactly what adults want to hear. Adults want to hear, well, I'm going to walk away. We don't end there. We don't stop. The question is, how are you going to do that? Let's talk about that. What's that going to look like? I have one mediator who puts it beautifully. You're going to figure out how to walk away with purpose and dignity. How do you do that? And so we kind of walk through that, and then of course, obviously we get the agreement, hopefully, and that is, it might be the reflection statement, it might be that they're going to do, in the mental health cases, a lot of times we're dealing with families, so there's some plans that we make with the families. And then, of course, that's how we thank them. I mean, we end the conference and we report back to the county. And am I okay time-wise? Because we've got you captured till when? 12:15. I'll share a couple of cases or a couple of instances with you that I think will appreciate. We had a case a few years ago. I will share with you, when I meet with the individual kids, that first initial thing, most of the times I have a parent there. Not always, but I would say probably at least 90% of the time we have a parent involved. It's not their conference. I also get established some, just by my conversation that I direct, that all the questions I direct, I totally look at the kid as far as getting them to do the dialogue so that the parent doesn't hijack it, and because that can happen. And so we had a case with 5 girls. Was it 5 or 7? It was 7. 7 girls at a high school who got into a knockdown. I mean, in my day we called it a rumble. That's how old I am. It was something. I mean, it was quite a fight. Went through all of the individual meetings. A couple of the parents absolutely thought this was a terrible idea to bring them all together. Finally convinced them. We did bring all of those, and all the parents were present, at least one of the parents to all of the girls. A couple of them were sisters. It was amazing when the adults got out of the way and let these kids have a dialogue about what happened. Now, the one thing I will always say to these young people, we're not bringing you together to become best buddies. It's not what it's about. It's not what it's about. You're gonna have conflict for the rest of your life. You gotta figure out how to do this. You gotta figure out how to not be okay, to not possibly agree with someone, or to have a dispute with someone and continue to work and move forward. And how do you do that? And how do you have those tough conversations? These 7 girls came together, and it was interesting because the 2 girls that really had the conflict literally brought all the rest of them together in this total agreement of, yep, we've got to move forward, we've got to show one another respect throughout, and they got it behind them. Like I said, when we can bring them together, it's amazing. We just got done with a case. This happened to be a probation case. Happened to be a stolen car. the couple was quite elderly. This was a really tough situation for this couple. It was a tough dialogue to have. Mom really wanted to protect, to deflect the blame from the girl. My mediator at one point thought he was going to have to maybe take her out so that we could keep moving forward. This young girl, basically, when the mom kind of said, well, she really wasn't to blame for this being stolen and this being stolen because the people that got the car afterwards took these things. And the girl said, I stole the car. I'm responsible for those other things being gone. I didn't take them, but they did, and I stole the car, so I'm responsible. And it was emotional, to say the least. And the old elderly couple really appreciated what happened. The healing has started. Are they totally healed? No, but they're getting there and they're on the path. Any other cases that you can think of that might come to?
Well, as you know, this is a little controversial. Sometimes people want kids punished. And so we have a state administrator who actually sat through one of these, and here's the story he tells. It was Lincoln High School. Kid after high school, I'll tell it was Lincoln Southeast, driving down the street. It was a December day, took a snowball and threw it through a window, busted a window. Kids were in the back of a pickup, went on, they got caught. The woman whose window he busted scared her to death. She spent the afternoon in a closet because she thought someone was breaking into her house. Husband had died, got them together, and kid, first time heard, oh my gosh, we were just throwing snowballs. And the parents and the kid got to hear the story of the effect it had on this person. Connection happened. He fixed her mailbox, mowed the lawn. There was an understanding of, oh my gosh, what I did, and it was an understanding from that woman of they weren't targeting her. Because a lot of times people feel like in some way that, oh my gosh, you're coming after me. And she got to hear from that kid how sorry they were, and they were doing stuff they just shouldn't have done. So this is one way, and we really emphasize, this is the hard stuff. If you want a kid to go through a few steps to get this to go away, there are other processes to do it. To get kids to have ownership, to make plans, to hear how this is difficult stuff. And so our processes is trying to create that safe space, and we appreciate to have a county that believes in what we're doing. So what we're going to do now, we're going to shift to, one more.
I'm sorry, and then I'll get it. I think one of the other things that's really important to understand about restorative justice, and I'm sure you're going to talk about this, and that is when I talk about the story and that their own truth needs to be heard. One of the things that I hear over and over and over when they come in and they share that story, is that we listen. We actually listen. I've had people, parents and kids both say, you're the first person that really listened to what happened. And we don't judge it. I don't comment about it. I just want to hear the story. And oftentimes parents are frustrated, particularly with the schools. I get it. And that they don't feel like the school heard them in any way. And we actually hear, and again, we don't judge it. We just give them that platform so that they can share. And you all know, gosh, when somebody actually listens, it's kind of a freeing spirit. It's like, they heard me. They heard me. Bill, share Lighthouse. You probably can put this on and function well.
How do I get my card?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's probably right here. Probably next. Oh, about that. Hey, everybody. How's it going? So I want to talk a little bit about truths before I go on, because she talked about this, and this is an important aspect. By the way, this is Drew up here. He's my restorative practices coordinator. So I brought him up. He's going to tell you a couple stories when I'm about ready to close. But this is before him. My old restorative practices coordinator, I was involved in a circle because the young lady had thrown rocks at cars, and I witnessed this. Police were called by somebody. Police came. She runs from the police. Then they get her, bring her back, start questioning her. So in the conference that we have, I'm in it, she's in it, restorative practices coordinator's in it, and start with her, and she starts talking about this and saying, well, yeah, I was with people that were throwing rocks in the street, but it wasn't me. And when we were going across the street, the police came, and I stood there and waited for them, and I talked to them. And lo and behold, my coordinator is upset because he's like, that's a flat lie. So it comes to me, and I get to tell my story, and of course I say what I saw, and he goes back to her and says, do you have anything you would like to say? And she goes, I'm confused. I know Bill's not lying, but I don't remember that. And so after all of this, I pulled him aside and I said, you understand that she wasn't lying? Well, yes, she was. No, she wasn't. That's what she saw. In our brain, chemistry is very interesting, especially in heightened situations. Our brain fills in the gaps. And so she really thought that was the truth. And so we have to be careful when we're judging, when we're in these situations, and let them tell their stories. Because she got there on her own. She knew I wasn't lying. Thought I heard something. Come on in. You're just fine. So I just want to talk about, because that's an important aspect. So I'm glad you brought that up, because we really need to be non-judgmental. We need to be there to listen to them and help them get through it on their own time. That's restorative. So I'm going to do a different approach, because I want you to understand a little bit more of the process itself with the restorative and how it really helps. I'll give you one statistic, because most of our conferences come from our alternative suspension program. We work with LPS in out-of-school suspensions. So parents get the opportunity to have their kids come to us. And I'll tell you a story at the end about that too, because it's a powerful thing when we give our young people that have been suspended a voice through their lenses. Then they participate, and wow, do they get things done. So it's a very, well, we had 175 young people go through our program this last school year. Of those, there were 5 we couldn't work with. 5. It's 3%, by the way. So pretty great statistics. It's one of those things that we know we can connect to young people. Sometimes they just can't do it, and we have to have them participate. So what I want you to understand is this is not a program. So when I go out and do training in restorative, I have to have people understand that it's not a vehicle, it's not a program, it's a culture. It's how we breathe, it's how we live. It's an important aspect to make for sure that we're instilling all of those values, everything that we do. All of my staff are trained in restorative practices, because the work they do is going to stop the bigger things from happening. And so that's why it's important. What is punishment? Try to do it because we think we have control, right? She was talking about punishment earlier, that some people want people punished because that feels like something's actually happening. That doesn't really work. If that worked, our prisons would be empty, and they're not. Fear. We try to use fear, right? Adults, there's a lot of adults, and I know there's a lot of people that you've had in your lives that use fear to try to control. That's what punishment is. You're trying to use fear to get a change in behavior. How does that work? And again, a lot of times we're focusing on a kid. When I first became executive director at Lighthouse and I'm writing grants, all the time I had to put at-risk youth in these grants. Man, it would drive me crazy, because I'm like, they're not at-risk youth. And so now that I have a voice, I say at-promise youth with at-risk behaviors. Because behavior is going to be changed, and that's what we need to focus on. It's not the kid, it's the behavior. It's not the doer, it's the deed. And then it sends the message that they're the problem, not their behavior. So I can't change if I'm the problem. We have to be very careful at what we're putting out there. So what do we do with restorative then? Again, we're looking at what was wrong being done, not what's wrong with them. And so if we're focusing on that behavior and working with the kid, we're starting with the kid. When I have the kid come in, I'm not going to go, oh, well, you just fought somebody, so what's that all about? I ask, what are you here for? I got to fight. What does that mean? What happened there? Then they talk. And then they talk. And after about 10 minutes, I know their whole life. I know everything that's going on. And they have turned to me and have actually said, I have no idea why I just shared everything with you. I haven't shared this with anybody, especially an adult. I said, I appreciate you trusting me. Because that's what restorative is. It's starting with them. So you're building that relationship. All based upon relationships. If you build a relationship with somebody, you're going to have better outcomes. They're going to want to come along with you. They're going to want to please. They're going to want to help. They're going to want to do all these things. It's what our staff do very well. So, does punishment actually provide accountability? Why do I have to be accountable? You already told me what I have to do now, and that's going to make things right. I have to go to jail. I have to get kicked out of school. So now that everything's okay, that's gone, right? That doesn't provide accountability. Changes the focus from the harm being done to being mad. That's why our kids that come into the alternative suspension program generally come in mad. Another adult that I have to deal with that doesn't care about me. So we have to sit down and have to break the ice off to even be productive. Sometimes it takes several days for them to come along and want to actually get some things done. But it's powerful because when we're done with them, they leave there and we oftentimes hear, can't we finish our school at Lighthouse? It's the first place I felt like you care about us, that you love us and want the best for us.
Isn't that sad? Yeah.
Very. I mean, I really want people to just look at our kids through their lenses and just want to know more about them. Let them tell their story. Well, I want everybody to love it. But how many people ask you your story? We don't get asked our own stories. People look at us. Well, but people look at us and they have prejudice. They're going to just define what they think is happening rather than asking questions. And the pandemic hasn't helped. Mental health, all these things have helped, challenges and all these things have changed our whole course. But restorative gets us to sit down and have relationships again. Get back to the basics. Relationships, relationships, relationships. So, I like this one, right? That's not supposed to work that way, is it? Dogs and cats aren't supposed to get along. Rules without relationships equals rebellion. High structure, high relationships, connect, then correct, affirm, then regret. So really what we're trying to do is just get down to the basics. Most of the time, even on the floor at Lighthouse for our after-school program, if I come into a room and a kid's doing something that is not meeting the expectations at Lighthouse, I generally don't even have to say anything. I'm just looking at them. Oh, Bill, I know, I'm sorry. I know I should get a strike. I'm like, well, I don't know, but can we have a conversation about that? So it's interesting, once you start doing this, they know, and then they're more willing to have a conversation about it too. And by the way, strikes, we use a 3-strike system like baseball. So if you get 3 strikes, you're out for the day. We generally don't have a lot of kids getting kicked out anymore though. We have a staff meeting every week and I'm like, okay, what are our youth issues? None. That's a good feeling when we have very few things to go over because the process is working. The staff are wonderful and they're taking care of business through this. Retributive justice compared to restorative. What are we doing? What rule was broken? What law was broken? How do we do that? Who broke it? What's their punishment going to be? Instead of who was harmed? How were they harmed? How can we repair this? It's all about relationships. I mean, I've had several conversations over the last couple days about this exactly. Just straight, regular relationships. How do we look at things is important. And that's why restorative works with diversion too, is if you have a kid coming in and I'm not having a prejudice with them or a prejudgment, but looking at them like, what's going on? How can we help? How many times do we ask our young people, how can we help? How many adults in their life care enough to ask that? That's why it's important. So these are all the things that we've seen a reduction in by using restorative practices, both in the alternative suspension with diversion students in our after-school program. And our kids, I gotta tell you, I'm very proud. I gotta keep talking about my staff because they're the ones that really make this work. You know, when we get formal stuff, that's important, but the work they do on a daily basis keeps us from going to that formal side. During the pandemic, our kids are having to do remote learning. Teachers don't know how to do it. Parents definitely don't know how to help. Our kids are like throwing their hands up. We decided to shift and do restorative or school at Lighthouse, remote, which means we have to open earlier. And that was something my staff had never done. Guess what? Kids are showing up. They're showing up with F's, very low grades, and by the semester end, most of them brought all of their F's up to A's and B's because of the work my staff did. That year was very tough on the staff, yet they were dedicated to the kids. And we had meetings and tried to just give them an experience, and that was all the staff. So all of their thoughts of how can we just continue to help these kids. Let me tell you, how are we doing? Oh, we're doing excellent, good. Let me tell you two stories. One's very early on in an alternative suspension program. And I gotta tell you, that was a very big challenge to even get up and running because LPS is tough to break into because they have their own data, they have their own things. It's very tough sometimes to break into, and we finally did it. And we started with one school first year, expanded to 2 schools, now we're district-wide for all middle and high schools. Our first kid that came in from Lincoln High, chronic suspended student. He would average 9 times a semester. So, very challenging, comes in with his hoodie on, sits down looking at the floor. So we're like, okay, engagement's gonna be interesting here. So we all sit down, start just, how's it going? Nothing. Keep asking him questions, move on, somebody else sits down, keeps asking him questions. About midday, he comes out and has lunch, comes back in, starts engaging in conversations. So he's suspended 5 days, which is the max, by the way, unless it goes to the district, then it can be 15. So starts engaging in conversations with us, starts getting deeper, deeper. So the 5th day, he's excited to go back to school. Goes back to school, I get a phone call from the principal. What in the heck are you guys doing over there? I'm like, oh, what happened that I didn't know about? He goes, this kid has been one of the toughest kids we've worked with. Never shown remorse, never taken accountability, nothing, total disengagement. He came into our office, cried, apologized, showed the remorse, and by the way, has never been suspended again. So they were like, I don't know what y'all doing, but keep it up. So that is a very extreme story, because the next one I'm going to tell you is another chronic suspended student with behaviors. We had to teach him how to do it differently. He kept coming back, kept coming back, kept coming back, and then all of a sudden, he started coming to Lighthouse and just engaging in a different way, and his suspension stopped. And then he comes up one day and says, I almost got suspended again. I'm like, oh, what happened? He said, well, the teacher was in a bad mood and said something sharply to me, and I reacted. And then I remembered what you all taught me. So I walked up to the teacher and I said, I'm sorry about that. You look like you're having a tough day and you didn't deserve that. Is everything okay? Flip the script. He then becomes restorative, doesn't get kicked out. The teacher flips and apologizes, and then they have this whole conversation. And it was powerful. And I'm like, I didn't even train this kid formally. He just got it. And now he's incredible. He graduates this year, and so I'm super excited. We haven't seen him back. He's doing a great job. But those are the stories that matter, is our kids just want to feel heard. I had a conversation earlier today talking about you as an adult. How does it feel if another adult doesn't listen to you? The person I was talking to said, well, I instantly want to cry. I said, I bet there's also some anger in there. Well, yeah, you know me. And I'm like, absolutely. And you're an adult with adult emotions and know how to control yourself. Yet we expect our kids to do this, that are still trying to find their way, trying to find their identity. What if you said, is everything okay? And what's going on? You just start there, and everything changes. So one more thing, and I'm going to let Drew come up here and share a couple stories because it's important. He's currently the director of the alternative suspension program we have there too, as well as the restored practices coordinator. But this one thing I want to leave you with is active listening. We want to try to problem solve as humans. We want to instantly go to problem solve. I want you to think about a relationship you have, and there was tension. You were mad. You were very upset in a situation. And the person you're talking to with that relationship was trying to problem solve for you. How did that go? Anybody, how did that go for you?
Thank you.
Yeah. What? Because they didn't hear you. Active listening is going, oh man, I'd be very upset in that situation too. Then they keep talking. Oh, I can understand why that pissed you off. All of those things keeps people with you. And that's the most important thing. We've got to keep them coming along. So let me hand it over to Drew. Oh no, watch out.
Hello. All right, like he said, I'm Drew. I'm the Alternative Suspension Program Director at Lighthouse. I have a few quick stories I guess I can share that kind of fills in the time a little bit. I guess my favorite story I have, one of our kids we had, I can't say his name, I can't say any of that, but his suspension was probably the most crazy I've ever heard. He had his car in Seacrest. Everybody knows what Seacrest is, the football field on A Street. And somehow his car in the parking lot ended up on its top on the football field. Nobody knows how, nobody knows where. They don't got camera footage, nobody knows. The staff came out and found him, his friends, all just laid out on the football field with his car flipped over. So safety issues, crime issues, police issues, all that was handled. He came to Lighthouse, didn't want to talk about it, obviously. It was like his friends weren't friends with him anymore, his parents were all mad. He did not want to talk about it. He came into the building, hoodie on, head down, don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me. 5 days later, he was asking me how he can work at Lighthouse. So I told him, you have to be a year out of high school, you have to be graduated, you have to have, go through a little bit of time after high school. It took him, let's see, I'm trying to think of the time. It was graduation day last year that he emailed me and said, I'm a year out, can I come back to Lighthouse? So it just shows that if you listen to the kids, let them talk, give them space, they'll be happy, they'll want to come back. Another story I have, most of the staff here will remember this kid. She was here for the rest of the school year. She came in, walked in the door, super bubbly, was a cheerleader, was happy. You'd be like, why is this kid suspended? Why is this kid here? I'm not gonna look at their file, I'm not gonna judge it, I'm just gonna talk to the kid, I'm gonna get to know them. You get to know them, you're like, oh my God, this is a cheerleader. This is the nicest kid I've ever met. She's offering to make us homemade meals for lunch. She's cooking for other kids. She's bringing snacks, she's bringing blankets for other kids. You're like, okay, why is this kid suspended? You call the school, you say, okay, this kid has straight A's, like, can they come back a little early? I think they learned their lesson. You come to find out this kid put another kid in the hospital. So it's just, one of those things where you can't judge them beforehand, because if I would have judged her off of her report, I would not have got to know her, she would not have cooked us dinner, the staff would have fallen in love with her, it would have been a whole different situation. But now this kid comes every single day, this kid wants to make lunch and dinner for the staff every single night, it's a great thing. That's all I got.
How about questions?
Any
Anybody have any questions for either of us?
Did you ever find out how he flipped his car?
Yeah, I did. There was some drinks involved, some stupidity, and just some donuts in the parking lot.
Yeah.
I ended up on the actual grass in Seacrest, so it was wild.
At least he opened up to you.
Yeah, oh yeah, he wants to work at Lighthouse now, so.
So the young lady the cheerleader,
Yes,
sounds like it was some of that halo effect.
yes.
What did that restorative justice look like? Taking her through that process and then working with that victim?
What it was kind of like was, she was used to everybody seeing what she had done and coming at her and thinking that she was the bully in the situation. But when you take a step back and you look at the whole situation, you sit down with both kids, you sit down with the parents even, you found out that these two girls had issues for years. And the girl who ended up putting her in the hospital kind of finally just snapped. And a lot of the kids, a lot of the parents, a lot of the adults in that situation were just looking at it as, oh, this is a bad kid. Look at how much damage she did. She is crazy, she was violent, but look at her past and look at everything. She has never had anything wrong with her, all straight A's, and
Like Ralphie on the Christmas Story, she just lost it.
wanted to.
I do want to reiterate, though, that she takes responsibility for her actions. And so that's an important aspect that I think we're missing in the story is she takes full responsibility. I have conversations with her too, and I absolutely love her because she's taking responsibility. She understands that wasn't the right approach. Felt like at the time that was her only thing to do that she could do. However, as she took a step back, she knows that that's not the approach that she needs to do and understands that jeopardizes her future of what she wants. Yeah.
So you take kids that are on mandatory reassignment as well as just?
We actually will take any kid to Lighthouse if they're in the 6th through 12th grade. And there's very rare occasion that we can't work with them. It usually has to do with violent tendencies where they just can't stop. Honest to God, we will work with any kids, and if we don't have the resources, we'll connect them to the community resources that are there. As a matter of fact, we have some crossover sometime because sometimes they have a law violation and get suspended, so they're going through double dipping on restorative, which is not a bad thing. The more they can get in front of that, the better off they're gonna be. Yes?
So, just being from Lincoln and the Lighthouse being in Lincoln, do you train LPS? Because a lot of the kids are coming from LPS, and if they had that training, they would know how to build those relationships better with the kids and talk to the kids and have those conversations so that they're not, when they come to the the Lighthouse, it's more positive and it's not negative.
So one thing, I do trainings all over the place, with schools, with private, all that stuff. LPS has their own trainers for restorative practice, so I do not do anything directly inside of LPS, and I know that.
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge, unfortunately, Mike Wren is the Restorative Justice Coordinator for the Lincoln Public Schools. He's fabulous. They are working hard as they can. One of the long-range goals for the Board of Education last year was to have everyone in the district trained. One person cannot do that. They are working towards it. They are trying to change the culture, but all of us know this is a long process. And when Bill talks about they're a hard nut to crack, whoa, they are. Love LPS, not dogging on them, but they are a hard nut to crack. And it's going to take a process, but it's going to take the whole community. It's not just, I think if we get young people on this culture movement, we're going to get there, but we've got a whole lot of my generation has to get out of the way and let this happen. And, but yeah, so any other questions?
And hold on, as she said, young people need to get on board. That's my next goal, is to train young people at Lighthouse, and they will run the conferences instead of us.
I just wanted to say one thing. Lancaster County is fortunate to have mental health diversion. I know other counties don't. It's a newer program that we were able to develop in partner with Centerpoint. Really fortunate. We take the mediation, and once they're done with that, that goes in the youth file, okay? Centerpoint will take that one step further, and then in the next session they have with the youth, they'll ask them about the conferencing. They want to know, what did the youth learn about that? Well, how was that engagement possible, and what they felt about the going through that process. So they will use that as a session and talk about that in the kids' therapy and recovery, which is kind of a unique thing, but they want to follow up with that, which I think is important. They've been starting to do that, and we've had really good engagement with the parent. And the youth kind of felt, yeah, I didn't really want to go into something like that, but after going through that and talking with all the parties, I felt better about it. I feel better talking about why I'm coming into, the diversion system and that. So it's very positive, and it really has impacted and helped the youth that we work and serve with.
And Randy, before I get to you, I want to say one positive thing about LPS and plug them here, because they had met with us at the end of the year, and they want to do it even better for our alternative suspension program. So they're aware, they're trying to figure out, it's a big, big system. And to change that big of a system, it's going to take time, and we're going to have to build it brick by brick.
Well, I was just gonna say that I agree with you 100%. There was a big push to get it started years ago, and it's had slow momentum, and I think you and I have both been yelling in the background for years. But I also wanna say, there are thousands of kids in LPS having great relationships with teachers and administrators every day.
Yep.
So let's not forget that there are a lot of people out there doing a lot of good work.
One of the most beloved principals
They
in
will be
Lincoln is
better.
Lincoln High.
They will be better
Yep,
with
so-
restorative skills.
Yep.
And it's kind of hard with the way the schedules go too, and to do the pullout. We have one of the programs, and our program is called Project Restore. We also have a girls' circle program where it is a pullout program through the school day, working with the girls at the middle school. Just like LPS and some of our other community partners, it's so many. And we're trying to do that. And Mike Wren, they had approached us with, why do we say Lincoln, years ago, about how we could collaborate and pair restorative justice with what we were doing with the girls' circle. So it is in process.
Yeah, and Casey did mention, we have 3 high schools that have active, actually, one wasn't active this last year, but Northeast and Lincoln High both have peer-to-peer mediation that they actually have as a class that the kids get credit for. Southeast is the high school who, the students, it was organic and it was built from the ground up by students. It's struggling a little bit, but I think we're gonna be on board. We've got a little bit different focus next year. So there are some things happening out there that it's moving. It's, and I think just the more information that the community has about how successful restorative practices can be just in life. And when Ryan talks about families, when we can actually get families sat down with 2 mediators and we're trained to listen and ask questions to get them to talk, and you have that dialogue that starts, that doesn't escalate, it's amazing some of the movement forward you can have happen. Any other questions?
I appreciate you all.